Welcome to this wandering journey where Armenia appears and disappears like a misplaced memory floating between mountains and empty roads. And as we begin moving through landscapes that seem to change their shapes without warning, the wind occasionally behaves as if it has been instructed to whisper forgotten directions into the cracked ears of old trees, while a stone chair beside the road turns slightly as though offended by footsteps it cannot hear. And in the city of Yerevan, the sunlight sometimes folds itself into odd patterns that make shadows chase their owners backward instead of forward, creating the feeling that time itself is trying to rearrange its steps. And when a traveler sits beside Lake Sevan with a warm cup of tea, the air hovers around the cup as if planning to lift it into the sky for reasons no one can explain. Just as the stones of Zorat's Karer pretend to respond when someone whistles between them, even though nothing actually happens, except the mind trying to convince itself that ancient stories are waking up from dusty sleep. And along the quiet roads of Armenia, where old wooden doors carry carvings that resemble symbols for thoughts that have not yet been invented, the doors seem to breathe out the confusion of day and night into the streets, turning ordinary corners into places where logic refuses to settle. And by the time you reach the long bridge near Tatev Monastery, the wind rising from the valley feels like it has been assigned the task of remembering every traveler's footprints, even though the ground forgets them instantly. And sometimes a local guide who is not really a guide, but insists on acting like one, will claim that the monastery walls occasionally change their colors if stared at long enough. Not because of light, but because the walls grow tired of keeping the same story every day. And as you break a piece of lavash bread in a small cafe, the fragrance rises like a quiet reminder that hidden beneath Armenia's soil, there might be tales that do not want to wake, but still drift about in half-conscious dreams, shifting slightly whenever a traveler pauses too long. And moving through the forests of Diligen, the trees sway as if they are whispering instructions to each other on how to confuse visitors by pointing all branches toward places that do not exist, while the path grows narrower in a way that feels intentional, as though the forest has decided to question your confidence. And somewhere above the canopy, a sound that may or may not be real echoes like a bell trying to find its own beginning. And when you lift a camera to capture the moment, the image that appears in the lens looks slightly different from the real world, as if the lens has created its own private version of Armenia, where nights begin in the morning and pieces of the sun occasionally drift across a quiet lake without sinking. And drinking grenadine in a bustling market, you might sense the ground murmuring something that feels like a reminder that the journey has not even started. Because Armenia's true mystery can be known only by those who mistake silence for speech and brightness for dust. And wandering into the red cliffs of Noravank, the rocks flash for a brief moment like they are trying to alert the sky that it forgot to finish something important. And as you climb upward, the air thickens with a kind of quiet that feels like an unfinished sentence stretching endlessly without punctuation or permission, resembling a journey whose purpose is simply to exist without offering clarity. And by the time night falls over Yerevan, the lights seem to stretch beyond their edges as if the city is trying to stay awake despite losing half of its dreams to the breeze. And when the traveler opens a window, the air enters the room like a long string of disorganized thoughts searching for somewhere to settle, repeating again and again that to understand Armenia, you must not understand it at all. You must simply walk without expectation, allowing every misplaced idea and every wandering detail to drift around you until the road itself forgets where it was supposed to lead. Because this journey moves like an endless sentence sentence with no clear structure, no defined pauses, and no intention except to continue swirling through the beautiful, confusing, unpredictable rhythm that Armenia carries within it, where every stone seems to move even when still, every wind seems to speak even when silent, and every traveler ends up wondering whether they are guiding the journey or the journey is quietly guiding them. Depicting people who are not there, and moments that have not occurred, almost as if the air is recycling fragments of dreams left behind by past travelers, and drifting into the forests near Agveran, you will find trees that seem entirely normal, until one notices that their branches occasionally sway in patterns that resemble conversations, as though the forest is gently debating whether to allow you deeper into its hidden corridors. And stepping onto ancient stone steps leading toward monasteries half buried in fog, the surrounding silence feels heavier than it should, carrying with it the suggestion that even silence has layers and textures in Armenia, each one revealing a different story if listened to with enough patience. And reaching abandoned caravan routes carved into cliffs, you may see faint marks etched by travelers who never completed their journey. Yet the marks appear fresher than they logically should, leaving the impression that time moves differently along those walls, sometimes forward, sometimes backward, sometimes sideways, depending on the mood of the valley. And as you walk further, you might encounter a dried riverbed where smooth stones are arranged in patterns resembling constellations, though no one claims to have arranged them and no explanation offered makes any sense, causing travelers to wonder if the river itself once had the strange habit of drawing maps for the sky. And at sunset, when the horizon turns a muted gold, the mountains around Aragats glow with a dim radiance that appears to come from within rather than from the sun, as if the peaks store light throughout the day and release it only at chosen moments that no one can predict. And finally, when night falls and the inns along lonely Armenian highways light their lamps with a flickering hum, you may find that the shadows inside your room stretch themselves farther than the limits of the floor, moving with a peculiar awareness as if they too are travelers trying to understand the strange and shifting world around them, reminding you that in Armenia, every path is uncertain, every detail has a secret, and every journey feels like a wandering thought drifting somewhere between memory and imagination, inviting you to keep walking even when you are no longer sure whether the land is guiding you or simply watching to see what you will do next.